Hey everybody, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. Now today, we were taking a deep dive into a bowl of something super delicious, and we owe this one to our buddy Micky.
Yeah, Micky.
He is always on top of what's good, what's tasty.
Always.
And it was actually his love of ramen that kind of sent us down this rabbit hole of research and articles and Wikipedia dives.
Yeah, his enthusiasm is infectious. And, you know, we started, as always, with the Wikipedia article on ramen.
Of course, yep.
A solid starting point. But then we found some interesting articles that discuss, you know, why it was once called Shina Soba, which sounds
it's a little
old-fashioned.
Yeah, a little dated, yeah.
And then also articles talking about the origin and global spread of ramen, including the connection with Korean ramyeon and some Taiwanese noodles that are popular in Japan as well.
Right. So Micky is really giving us a task here.
Absolutely.
We're not just talking about a casual conversation about ramen.
No.
We're going deep.
We're going deep.
We want to know how ramen transformed from its Chinese origins to the global phenomenon it is today, and why it was once called Shina Soba.
Right.
What's the story there? And we also want to find out why in Korea they call it ramyeon, right? Their version of instant noodles, I guess.
Yeah.
And also, what are those Taiwanese noodles that are similar to Japanese ramen, and why are they so popular there with the Japanese people?
Yeah.
So it's a noodle odyssey, folks.
Right.
Let's jump right in. Where do we begin?
Well, as always, we start at the beginning, and it's very interesting to note that the early names for ramen, or ramen-like dishes in Japan, had names that really signaled their Chinese origins. You have Nankin Soba, which literally means Nanjing noodles.
Right.
You have Shina Soba, which translates to Chinese noodles. And you have Chuka Soba, which also means Chinese noodles.
Wow. So those are pretty straightforward names, right? You come across something new. You call it where it's from.
You know, Nanjing noodles,
yeah.
Chinese noodles, but then there's Shina Soba.
Yeah, that one's a little different.
That one's a little different.
There's something else going on there.
Yeah, and you've hit on a very important point. While Shina, written with those two characters, was initially just another way to refer to China, it unfortunately picked up some very negative baggage over time, and this was largely due to its association with anti-Chinese racism and Japanese imperialism. So whereas you might find back in 1903, for example, a Nanjing noodle restaurant in Yokohama, Chinatown, which was actually nicknamed Nanjing Town back then.
Really?
The term China became very problematic.
Okay.
So whereas you might see an old photo or a sign from that era referring to Shina Soba, you're much more likely these days to hear Chuka Soba or just plain ramen.
Right. So, Micky, it's more than just a name change.
Yeah.
It's really a reflection of how language can be impacted by history and changes in society. Require that even the name of a food has to change.
Absolutely.
Wow, that puts a whole different spin on it. It's not just something that went out of style. It's something that had to be changed because of the historical baggage it was carrying.
Yeah.
Okay, so when did the name ramen actually enter the scene?
So the term ramen, written with those two characters, first appeared in writing in Japan back in 1928.
Okay.
And it appeared in a book by Seiichi Yoshida called How to Prepare Delicious and Economical Chinese Dishes.
Okay.
Now, interestingly, in this context, Yoshida wasn't using ramen to describe a complete dish, the way that we know and love it today. Instead, he was referring to the Chinese noodles themselves.
Got it.
Specifically, how to make them using flour and kansui, which is that special alkaline salt water that gives ramen noodles their unique texture. He even included a little illustration on how to hand knead and stretch the dough.
So back then, it was really all about the main ingredient, the noodle itself.
Right.
But when did it become the name for the whole dish?
Right. So that happened a little later.
Okay.
In 1947, the first time ramen is mentioned as a complete dish is in a cookbook.
By Hatsuko Kuroda, called Enjoyable Home Cooking. And this is a key distinction, Micky, because this marks the point when the Japanese had truly embraced and were naming this adapted Chinese noodle soup as something distinctly their own.
Okay, so now I've got the name evolution down, but let's go back to its origin story for a sec. We know that it has Chinese roots starting in Yokohama, Chinatown in the early 20th century. But the Wikipedia article specifically says that it did not come from northern Chinese ramyeon, those hand-pulled noodles.
Yeah.
That kind of surprised me. I always pictured some noodle master in northern China, you know, just stretching dough like crazy.
Yeah, and that's a very common misconception.
Okay.
While the word ramen is indeed a Japanese take on the Chinese word ramyeon, which means pulled noodles.
Okay.
The actual ramen noodle is cut, not pulled. Okay.
Interesting.
And the sources suggest that ramen is more likely a descendant of southern Chinese noodle dishes.
Okay.
Think about things like char siu tangmian.
Which is, a roast pork noodle soup known for its savory broth and tender char siu from Guangdong. Or ruzi tangmian, which is a delicate sliced meat noodle soup from the Jiangnan region.
Okay.
So this makes a lot of sense when you consider who was living in Yokohama Chinatown back then, and that was a large number of Cantonese and Shanghainese folks.
Yeah.
So instead of picturing those dramatic hand-pulled noodles, Mickey, we should be thinking about those flavorful broths and those different noodle styles of southern China as the true culinary ancestors of ramen.
Oh, that's fascinating. So it's not a direct line from northern China, but more of an evolution of southern Chinese flavors and styles. Really cool.
Yeah.
And it really shows how immigrant communities bring their food traditions with them and how they adapt when they land in a new place.
Yes.
Now, talking about the noodles themselves, what makes those ramen noodles so unique is the kansui, that alkaline salt water that gives them that yellowish tinge and that kind of bouncy, chewy texture that we love. What's interesting is there is a record of noodles being made with kansui called Zhengdamian as early as 1488 in Kyoto. They were mentioned in the diary of a monk at Shukokuji Temple. These were Yuan dynasty noodles. So the concept of noodles made with this alkaline solution wasn't entirely new to Japan.
Yeah, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
1488.
Way back.
Wow.
So the idea of these special noodles had already been introduced, even if it wasn't exactly the ramen that we know and love today.
Right.
Now, speaking of the ramen we know and love today, we can't talk about the birth of ramen without mentioning a Ray Raken, right? This is legendary.
Yeah, absolutely. Ray Raken, which opened its doors in Asakusa, Tokyo in 1910, is widely considered to be the very first specialized ramen shop.
Okay.
The founder, Kanichi Ozaki, was Japanese, but he actually hired 12 Cantonese cooks from Yokohama Chinatown, and they served what they called Chinese soba, which again points to that early Chinese connection.
Right.
Now, Ray Raken wasn't just a ramen joint. They also served other Chinese dishes.
Okay.
And are actually credited with inventing some Japanese-Chinese fusion dishes.
So it's this really interesting fusion of cultures and styles in one shop, serving up this early form of ramen.
Exactly.
But then the notes mentioned that ramen really exploded after World War II. What happened during that time?
Well, the period after World War II was absolutely critical for the rise of ramen.
Okay.
Japan was facing severe food shortages.
Right.
And the U.S. stepped in and flooded the market with cheap wheat flour.
Okay.
So suddenly wheat noodles became much more accessible and affordable.
Right.
And ramen became a sort of survival food. It was often sold by vendors in the black market.
Wow.
Because the government's food distribution system was really struggling to keep up with the demand.
So it's kind of crazy to think of ramen as a survival food.
Right.
And now it's this comfort food, this delicious treat.
Exactly.
That's such a staple in Japanese culture.
Yeah. And it wasn't just the cheap wheat flour.
Okay.
Millions of Japanese soldiers were returning home from China and East Asia.
Right.
And many of them had developed a taste for wheat noodles during their time abroad.
Right.
Plus, the post-war period saw a boom in those mobile ramen stalls.
Right. Those yatai.
The yatai, exactly that, offered a fantastic opportunity for people to start their own small businesses. It was a way to earn a living during a very tough time. And you also have to factor in the American influence. They were actively promoting the nutritional benefits of wheat and animal protein, which helped to shift Japan's traditionally rice-based diet. So you really had this perfect storm of cheap wheat, returning soldiers who were craving noodles, this entrepreneurial spirit, and even a little bit of a push from American dietary ideas. So it makes perfect sense how ramen went from a relatively niche dish to something mainstream.
Right. And then, of course, came instant ramen in 1958, thanks to the legendary Momofuku Ando.
Yeah.
That was a game changer.
Revolutionary.
I mean, a Japanese poll even voted it the greatest Japanese invention of the 20th century.
Absolutely.
I mean, instant ramen took the dish from those street stalls and restaurants and put it right into people's kitchens everywhere.
Absolutely.
And it further cemented ramen in Japanese culture.
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard to even imagine a world without instant ramen now.
Right.
It's my go-to quick meal when I need something quick and easy and comforting, and it's this huge global phenomenon.
And it is.
And then fast forward to the 80s, ramen's not just a quick meal anymore. It's a full-blown cultural icon.
Absolutely. By the 1980s, ramen had truly become a Japanese cultural icon.
Yeah.
people started traveling the country specifically to try different regional varieties.
Right.
And ramen gained international fame. The opening of the Ramen Museum in Yokohama in 1994 really solidified that status. And today there are over 24,000 ramen shops all over Japan.
Wow.
Even Michelin-starred ramen restaurants.
That's crazy.
It's come a long way.
Yeah.
From its humble Chinese beginnings.
To a globally recognized and loved dish.
Exactly.
It's pretty incredible when you think about the whole journey.
Yeah.
From Shina's Soba with its complicated past to this celebrated food.
It really is.
Now let's switch gears a bit and talk about its global spread, specifically the case of ramyeon in Korea.
Yeah.
We know that outside Japan and China, it's called Rishi Ramen, meaning Japanese-style ramen, which makes sense.
Right.
But why ramyeon in Korea?
Yeah, that little change from ramen to ramyeon is actually quite telling and points to the strong influence of Japanese ramen on Korea. So whereas in Japan, ramen can refer to both fresh noodle dishes that you get in the restaurant and instant noodles that you make at home.
Yeah.
In Korea, ramyeon almost exclusively means instant noodles.
So it's like ramyeon is specifically the Korean take on instant ramen.
Precisely.
Yeah.
And Korea basically took the Japanese word ramen and transliterated it into Korean as ramyeon.
Got
it. Their instant noodle industry really took off in 1963 when Nongshim introduced it. And they were heavily inspired by the technology and the popularity of Japanese instant ramen. And so they chose to call it ramyeon, and the name just stuck.
Okay.
And what's really interesting is the Chinese term for instant noodles is paomian, which literally means pao, meaning soaking, plus mian, meaning noodles. So it emphasizes the preparation method.
Right.
But ramyeon keeps that noodle soup feel in the name.
So it really emphasizes that it's still a noodle soup even when it comes in a packet.
Exactly.
And it links back to the Japanese dish.
Yeah.
Now, Korean ramyeon has really developed its own personality, though, right?
Yeah.
It's not just a carbon copy of Japanese instant ramen.
Oh, absolutely not.
What's different?
Korean ramyeon has developed a very strong identity. It's often much spicier than Japanese ramen, with very popular flavors like kimchi. You'll often see it served with extra goodies thrown in like an egg, some vegetables, sometimes even dumplings, those chewy rice cakes called youytuk, or even a slice of cheese.
Wow.
So brands like Shin Ramyeon, that red packet is iconic, and Buldak Ramyeon lives up to its fire chicken name.
It's spicy.
Are recognized globally for their intense and delicious flavors.
Right. It's really cool how they took the concept and ran with it.
Yeah.
And made it uniquely Korean.
Absolutely.
Now, the last stop on our global noodle tour is Taiwan.
Wow.
We want to explore those Taiwanese noodles that are similar to Japanese ramen that are a hit with the Japanese people. So what do we got?
Well, the standout Taiwanese noodle dish that gets compared to ramen and is particularly loved by the Japanese is Taiwanese beef noodle, or nurumyeon. And just like ramen, it features wheat noodles swimming in a rich, flavorful broth with some serious toppings. In this case, tender, often braised chunks of beef.
Man, that sounds amazing.
Yeah.
Where does that dish come from in Taiwan?
Well, Taiwanese beef noodle has its roots in Sichuan immigrants who came to Taiwan around 1949.
Okay.
Around the same time as the major mainland China migration to Taiwan.
Wow.
And it's become a national dish in Taiwan.
Wow.
And has gained a huge following in Japan, likely because of that deeply savory, often slightly spicy broth and those generous melt-in-your-mouth pieces of beef. It offers a very similar comforting and hearty experience to a good bowl of ramen, even though the flavor profiles are distinct.
Okay, so while the star of the show is different, beef instead of pork or chicken, the overall idea of noodles in a rich, flavorful broth with some hefty topping really resonates with the Japanese palate.
Absolutely.
Now, our notes mention Danzai noodles. Are those in the same ballpark?
Well, Danzai noodles do share the characteristic of being a noodle soup.
Right.
But the sources we looked at really highlighted Taiwanese beef noodle
Right.
for its popularity among the Japanese and its closer resemblance to ramen in terms of that rich broth.
Okay.
And satisfying toppings. Danzai noodles are known for their smaller portion size.
Okay.
And a very unique broth that often features shrimp. So while interesting beef noodle is really the key Taiwanese contender in the eyes of the Japanese ramen enthusiast.
Got it. So it's really that hearty, flavorful broth and the delicious beef that make Taiwanese beef noodle such a hit with ramen lovers in Japan.
Yeah.
Well, Micky, I think we've really gone down the rabbit hole, or should I say the noodle bowl for you today?
I think we have.
We traced ramen all the way back to its Chinese origins. We saw how its name evolved in Japan, from Shina Soba to the ramen we know today.
Absolutely.
We followed its global journey.
Yeah.
We figured out why Korean instant noodles are called ramyeon.
Right?
And we even discovered why Japanese foodies are so into Taiwanese beef noodle.
It's been quite the journey.
It's been a delicious adventure.
It has.
What a deep dive.
It really makes you think about how intertwined our cultures are through food.
Yeah.
And how historical events shape the dishes that we love, and even the names that we give them.
Right.
A simple bowl of noodles, it turns out, can tell a really complex and fascinating story.
Absolutely. Now, speaking of fascinating stories, if you've enjoyed this deep dive, be sure to check out our good friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. He's got some cool travel vlogs, some in-depth whiskey reviews, and a great selection of background music. We always like to give him a shout out.
Yeah, go check him out.
All right, thanks for joining us here on The Deep Dive. We'll catch you next time.
See you later.